Hey everyone, today I'm going to show an important part of the maintenance of your historical instruments, the oiling. Now, while there are no wrong ways to oil your instrument, there certainly are ways which include an element of risk to the condition of your instrument, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So, are you ready for this? It's morphin' time! Brontosaurus! So, the winter weather has come to Basel and the humidity has dropped. On my Baroque bassoon, I can see that the exterior is becoming slightly dry to the touch and that the finish is a bit more matte. I can also see that in the finger holes there's a little bit of white dust appearing, which I've been told from a few respected woodwind players is a sign that the instrument needs oiling. So oiling is an annual process which historical bassoonists must go through since the tenor side of the bore is not lined with rubber or ebonite like modern bassoons are. If you are a modern bassoonist, don't do this to your instrument. Now, what oil should you use? In terms of oil, most players I know use almond oil. When almond oil dries, it hardly leaves any residue, which makes things easier to clean later. I find this to be rather expensive and hard to find though, so I prefer peanut oil. Peanut was an oil recommended to me by an ancient master of historical instruments. It's cheap, it's available everywhere, and it gets the job done, but it leaves a residue which has to be cleaned off later. Many makers prefer to use linseed oil, but when dried, the residue hardens and can end up slightly altering the bore of the instrument. Some makers who oil their instruments with linseed oil counter this problem by re-reaming the bore after the oil has dried. So maybe don't use it yourself. But how do you do it? There are many different techniques to oiling a bassoon that I've seen or at least heard of, and there isn't any particular one which I would say is wrong, but there is one which I would recommend people avoid. As a rule, try not to stick pieces of cloth soaked in oil into the bore of the bassoon and use a rod to ram it all the way through. If the cloth is too thick, it can get jammed in there and may damage the bore. The rod you use to push the cloth through might also rub against the wood if you aren't careful and damage it. The process I will show you today is the one I've been doing for the past 7 years, and I find it to be perfectly safe for my instrument, but I warn you, it can seem a little bit excessive. Not to worry though. Step 1. At the minimum, take off all of the pads on the instrument. You can also strip the keys off, but that isn't necessary. Make sure any screws are screwed back into their sockets so as not to lose them. Step 2. Over a sink, pour oil straight down the bore of the wing joint until it comes out the other side. Begin rotating the wing and look down the bore to see if the whole surface area is covered. Repeat this process until it is. Remember, I'm not using a lot of oil here, but don't worry, the wood will drink what it wants and reject the rest. Then, with a rag, rub the oil which has come out of the tone holes into the exterior of the wing joint. Step 3. Follow step 2, but with the tenor side of the boot joint. This process is much more tricky since you won't be able to see clearly what's going on inside. I suggest pouring while rotating. You won't need to pour oil down the bass side, so once you believe the tenor side has been completely covered, then begin rubbing in the excess oil on the surface of the boot joint. As best as possible, avoid getting oil around the tone holes which will be covered by a pad. As these instruments don't have seats, an oily surface will cause leakage. If you do get oil on there, don't worry, just rub profusely with a dry section of the rag. These areas will need more attention the following day when you rub residue away. Step 4. Rub in some oil onto the exterior of the long joint and bell. Step 5. Put the instrument in a corner on some newspaper or cardboard and let the oil dry or drain out. Make sure the boot joint is upside down so that the oil runs out. Step 6. Wait at least 24 hours. I generally let them sit for 3 or 4 days. After this period of waiting, rub any residue away and put the keys back on. Now, if you feel that the instrument is still a little dry, or if the humidity level is very low where you live, you might want to do this whole process a second time. This is totally fine. I generally recommend to oil an instrument as many times per year as many hours it is used per day on a regular basis. I think I said that right. So if you play 4 hours per day, then oil it 4 times per year, 1 hour per day, 1 time per year, etc. I find that most often my bassoon screams for an oiling at the change of the seasons. If you want to do a quick top-up without going through this laborious process, you can simply buy a silk swab, douse it in oil, and pull it through the wing and boot joints. This is a fast and useful solution, but you won't ever be able to use the swab again, so the cost of this could add up. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful to you. If you would like to support this channel, please consider becoming a patron via Patreon, and don't forget to like here on YouTube, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and take it easy. Bye-bye.